Hey, what's up you guys? I'm Sara Lubratt, and today's video is going to be all about how to win NaNoWriMo. And yes, this is how to win NaNoWriMo from somebody who has not won several times, but I'm just trying to help you guys learn from my mistakes so that you don't need to make these mistakes this year. These are also tips that I'm going to be following this year in an attempt to win. For those who may not be super familiar with what NaNoWriMo is, NaNoWriMo stands for National Novel Writing Month, and basically it is the month of November where a bunch of writers, I'm going to say, get together, even though it's mostly online and virtual, to write the rough draft of a new story. And when I say rough draft, I mean in this case 50,000 words. The most common breakdown of that 50,000 words across November is 1,667 words a day, but basically the goal is to get a rough draft done during the month of November so that you have a finished rough draft that then you can go back and edit in future months. If you go on to enjoy this video, I would really appreciate it if you could give it a big thumbs up because that really supports my channel. And now without further ado, I have 5 tips for you guys today, so let's get into it. Tip number 1 is pre-planning. Yes, this one has taken me a long time to accept because I am a pantser, but I think that this also works for pantsers just as well as it works for plotters. There are 3 primary things that I'm talking about with pre-planning, and one of those is your story, one of those are which days you're going to be able to write, and the third one is your life and family in November. There are lots of videos here on YouTube about how to plan and prep your story for NaNoWriMo, so I'm not really going to go into that one as much as the other 2 areas in this video. Something that I think was an absolute game changer for this year was I heard somebody recommend that you should take a look at your calendar before November starts and try to figure out how many days you're actually going to be able to write and which days might have family activities or trips planned or weekends that are already blocked off, or what days school and work might be really busy, and try to be really realistic about which days you don't think you're going to be able to write because of how much other stuff is going to be happening. And then also give yourself like 2 or 3 buffer days just in case you're not in the mood to write or in case something else pops up. But just try to be really nice to yourself in the planning of this. And then with that information of, oh yeah, I'm not going to be able to write 5 or 6 days during the month, and then adding another 2 or 3 days to that. Because there are 30 days in November, let's say you decide to not write 9 of those days. By looking ahead, you can change that pretty typical 1,667 words a day to dividing 50,000 words by 21 days instead of 30 days, which means that you would need to write closer to 2,380 words a day in order to reach that 50,000. Something else that's really important to look at when you are working on pre-planning is when you are going to write and where. Are you going to write at your kitchen counter? Are you going to meet up with your local Nano group? Are you going to go write at a coffee shop or a bookstore? I have learned that it's really important for me to figure out where exactly I'm going to write and when I write best in order to be the most productive during my writing sessions, which would give you a fair shot at winning NaNoWriMo. In that same vein, I'm going to have to recommend that you start early and strong just because there's such a momentum going into NaNoWriMo, especially if you are involved in any NaNoWriMo groups. People are so stoked for like the first 3 days of Nano, especially if you're doing really well. And so it always seems to be a really good idea to lean into that as much as possible, to really take advantage of as much of that momentum as you possibly can to get a really good chunk done. So start early and start strong. As far as pre-planning for your life during November, I would recommend telling family or friends that this is something that you're doing, especially if you live with family or friends, because you're going to want to try and minimize distractions while you're writing. So if you live with your family and you say, this is the time that I'm going to write every day, hopefully they will do better at respecting that because you told them ahead of time. They might also need reminding, but hopefully they would remember. Another positive result in telling family and friends is that you might actually get some encouragement and accountability out of it, as well as less interruptions while you are writing. Tip number 2 is to research before November, like before you start writing. Yes, I understand that this might be more advice for the plotters than the pantsers, but if you think you're going to need to research something in accordance to your topic, or if you want something figured out before you start writing, I would highly recommend starting your research before before November. That's why October is sometimes called Preptober, is because people are preparing for NaNoWriMo. Because researching while you are trying to write so many freaking words can often slow you down and get you distracted. We are trying to eliminate distractions this month, especially before we hit our word counts. After we hit our word counts for the day, it's a little bit more okay. But the goal is to write 50,000 words in a month, and in order to do that, you're going to need as few distractions as possible, so try to research ahead of time. Tip number 3 is to be nice to yourself, because this month is all about fast drafting. That is basically trying to get a full first draft or rough draft out on paper in a month. That's crazy. Like, if you think about that, that's wild. But it's really important to remember that every single book that you've read started as a rough draft. So try to be really nice to yourself. I know that this is easier said than done, but try not to compare your rough draft and what you are writing in a first fast draft to, let's say, your favorite book. Another way that works for me when I'm trying to be nicer to myself when I'm writing, especially if you haven't done all of the research that you needed to do before you started writing, is writing in shorthand and leaving parentheses and blanks and highlighted portions and filler names for basically anything you don't already know, because you can always go back and change that. Always go back and change it. I personally love using blanks or placeholder names, and sometimes I'll just do like a series of letters just in all caps, so it's easy to search the document later on and switch it out for something else, because I'm really not great at naming my characters until after I've written the story. And if I can't totally figure out what I want to happen during a scene, I will leave it in a parenthesis portion, like I basically need to get to this point. And then later, editing Sara will go back and look at it, and sometimes that's a good thing, and sometimes it doesn't go as well as I want it to. But it's always better than trying to do it in that moment and getting writer's block and getting stuck just because I can't figure out that portion right then and there. NaNoWriMo is all about trying to be really, really fast. So be nice to yourself, take a deep breath, and then write the words. And then a very nice segue from tip 3 to tip 4 is editing later. Try not to edit yourself during your writing in November. Again, I know that that is probably easier said than done, but you will save yourself so much time and so much mental capacity if you save the editing for later on. This will also help greatly with your speed and moving forwards if you're not looking backwards, unless it's to read the last couple of paragraphs to remind yourself where you were. I think it's also important to understand that changes are going to happen, whether with plot or with character arcs, but I recommend just taking it in stride, and don't let that stop you, and don't go back and edit things to change them leading up to that point. Wherever you are, when you notice that a change is happening, just make that change consistent moving forward, or as consistent as possible. Again, you can always go back and edit later on. And tip number 5 is having a social media plan. And by social media, I am including TV and Netflix in this, because again, I'm recommending that you minimize your distractions, and endless scrolling on social media like Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter is definitely a major distraction. And I have noticed for myself that my attention span is longer when I don't start my day on social media. And so I would highly recommend trying to get all of your words in before you go to social media, or before you let yourself do mindless scrolling on social media or mindless binge watching on Netflix or YouTube. And then when you hit your words for the day, go nuts, go crazy, celebrate. Feel free to scroll through Instagram, feel free to watch as much Netflix or YouTube as you want, but I am just saying that it is very, very easy to get swept up into it and lose hours to social media that could have been used towards writing, especially during the month of NaNoWriMo. NaNoWriMo is all about self-control and discipline, and I know that on many phones there are actually ways for you to set social media time limits, but I do have it set on my phone, and yes, sometimes I snooze it for another 15 minutes, but I have noticed that it really helps the amount of time that I actually spend on social media. So you could look into setting something like that up for yourself. If you're going to start writing in the morning and want to write before you use anything on the internet, you could very easily just turn the Wi-Fi off on your computer the night before so that you don't have any internet distractions when you open up your computer for your writing session. And just a general reminder for NaNoWriMo and writing and life in general is that progress is progress. If you have any helpful practical advice on how to win NaNoWriMo, I would love to read it down in the comments section below. And I'm sure that most people watching this video are also looking for other pieces of advice. So let's encourage each other and cheer each other on. That being said, if you enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate it if you could give it a big thumbs up, because it really supports my channel by telling the YouTube algorithm that you liked my video and that someone else might too. If you want to see more videos like this from me, or if you want to follow along on my NaNoWriMo journey this year, feel free to scroll down below and hit that big red subscribe button, because I am posting videos twice a week on Mondays and Thursdays, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!